Going on, everybody? All right. Well, there was a big climate change town hall, like a 7-hour long climate change town hall yesterday. And let's see let's see some of the top tier Democratic presidential candidates. What all, they had to say about everything. What was some of the key points, the key takeaways. There was quite a few disturbing takeaways. And we're going to get into them. We're going to start with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders says America should fund abortions in poor countries to fight climate change. I don't know how climate change activists think, because while I do care about the climate, I also know the difference between climate and weather, which they seem not to understand very well. And I also understand that what Bernie Sanders is proposing is terrifying on many different levels. But let's get into it. 2020 Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders said he supports abortion, in part, as a way to curb human population in light of climate change. In way to curb human population. That's a really, you're pushing a fine line. You're walking a fine line when you start saying stuff like this. This is very Nazi-esque to me. But let's get into the story. A member of the audience asked a Vermont senator about human population growth during CNN's Climate Town Hall Wednesday. She specifically asked Sanders whether he would support measures to curb that growth. The audience member added that the planet cannot sustain this growth, and empowering women and educating everyone on curbing the population seems reasonable. Why do you have to empower women? That's kind of sexist, Women are only half the equation, We need to empower everyone, wouldn't you say? To be equal. This whole equality thing that the left tries to push, they don't seem to understand the definition of equality at all. Sanders says he supports women being able to control their own bodies and have abortions when answering the climate change question. I'm all for women controlling their body. Not a problem. But there are a lot of little details in there that cause problems. When you're getting down and nasty with your partner, how come the outcome of that is strictly a woman's issue? It takes two to make a baby. Seems like there should be, at least equality in who makes the decision on that baby's life. I know that's not a popular stance, but it's kind of how I feel about it. Well, and that abortion just straight up is kind of bad. With a few exceptions. And yes, I am a conservative, but I do allow exceptions. Because there are certain situations where it's just, it just puts you in a rock and a hard place. But I digress. The answer is yes. And the answer has everything to do with the fact that women in the United States of America, by the way, have the right to control their own bodies and make reproductive decisions, Sanders said. Sanders specifically voiced support for the U.S. taxpayer-funded abortions, bringing up the Mexico City Agreement, the Washington Examiner reported. And the Mexico City Agreement, which denies American aid to those organizations around the world that allow women to have abortion or even get involved in birth control, is totally absurd, he added. No, it's not. Why on earth would America fund abortions in foreign places? How are the governments and the people of these foreign places really going to perceive America funding killing their babies? I have an inkling that a lot of places wouldn't be that receptive to this. I mean, think about it. A lot of people see America as kind of an imperialistic situation. We always go places and tear crap up, start wars for regime change and this, that, and the other. Which thank goodness we got a president right now who is fairly anti-war for a change. That's something different from the last few presidents we've had. And yeah, so that's a good thing. But yeah, how do you really think these countries are gonna see this? As America is trying to come into your country and kill your babies. Depopulate your area. I don't think a lot of places are going to receive that well. It just doesn't seem like it would happen. But yeah, that's Bernie Sanders for you. So I think, this is a quote from Bernie Sanders. So I think, especially in poor countries around the world, where women do not necessarily want to have large number of babies, and where they can have the opportunity through birth control to control the number of kids they have. Something I very, very strongly support. Birth control is fine for me. I don't have a problem with birth control, but I also don't think America... Really, when he says America funds stuff, the American government fund this, that means me and you, the American taxpayer. I don't think the American taxpayer, the American people, should be funding foreign nations birth control medicine. Or abortions, for that matter, which I don't think the American people should fund or have to put up the funds for abortions, period. I don't think it should be abortion centers in America should be federally funded, period. There's a lot of federal taxpayers who don't want nothing to do with abortion. Yet they don't have a voice anymore. We're not allowed to have a voice. People like me who don't believe it should be funded federally, we don't have a voice. Everyone says, oh, we all have a voice. No, we don't. Because there's millions of us who believe we should not be federally funding, through our tax money, abortion clinics. Yet the government still federally funds abortion clinics. Albeit with Trump, a lot of them have been defunded due to their practices and how they go about things and the conditions there and, this, that, and the other. But still, shouldn't be funded like that. If they want funding... they should have to pull up their own funds for it. All of the major Democratic candidates have expressed support for abortion rights, but none have tied abortion to climate change or discussed it as means of population control. Well, they shouldn't. That's a good idea. When you start talking about population control, you really scare a big portion of the population. We've seen this throughout history at times where other leaders had forms of population control. And what did it result in? It generally resulted in the deaths of millions and millions of their citizens. For no real good reason. They just picked out random groups they didn't like. Gays, gypsies, Jews, communist. Not too big of a loss there, but you know what I'm saying. It's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. This is a globalistic view that should be worrisome. And the fact that Bernie Sanders, in a roundabout way, seems to be supporting some of these type of measures should be very worrying to any rational and sane person. Even you progressives out there, which... when it comes to rationality and sanity with the progressives, there's few and far between, it seems. Like I said, I don't like to make complete blanket statements. But when it comes to the progressives, it seems like a blanket statement. They're viable in those situations because the progressives, they're in their own little ideological cult. They act like... the this modern progressivism is a religion. And they'll follow people like Bernie Sanders. And they'll go on every word he says. It's kind of scary when you think about it. But the good news is, I don't think America as a whole is willing to vote in a Bernie Sanders, a Bolshevik, socialist, communist type. He's too flimsy. He's too flippy-floppy, too. If you look at a lot of his positions from 2016, he's gone back on those. I always like to bring up the border security thing when it comes to Bernie Sanders. Because Bernie Sanders used to be a fervent supporter of strong, really strong borders. Because he's a commie. And commies know, without strong borders, socialism and communism will not happen, cannot happen. Financially, it really can't happen regardless. But, yeah. And he wants to do all this. He wants the federal government to pay for these foreign land abortions on top of his $16 trillion climate change plan. Yeah. This guy really, for someone who doesn't like capitalism, this, that, and the other, he sure does think we just are made of money and just can keep making that. That's one of the problems with America is we have this bad habit of keeping our money printing machines on constantly instead of turning them off here and there. But yeah, that's pretty much the story. I'd love to get your opinions on Mr. Bernie Sanders and his abortions for the world funded by the U.S. taxpayer. I'd love to get your comments on that. And as always, like, share, and subscribe. I will catch you on the flip side.